On the 29th of April, 2001, Camp 2 on Everest, about 21,000 feet above sea level. The morning is calm, the wind has dropped, and the sun is hitting the tents hard. Babu Chiri Sherpa, the man who had stood on the summit of the world 10 times, who once spent 21 hours up there without oxygen, who set a record for the fastest ascent, steps out of his tent. "I'm going to take a photo of the route. I'll be right back." He walks out, no more than a few hundred meters from camp. The weather is perfect, no danger at all. Just a simple stroll. A few hours later, his teammates notice he's still gone. Another hour, still no sign of him. By evening, panic sets in. The greatest Sherpa on the planet has vanished just a stone's throw from his tent. A search begins. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Tracks in the snow lead to a single point, and then stop cold. They just end. As if someone erased the man from the face of the earth. What happened to the climber who seemed stronger than Everest itself? To understand the scale of what happened, you need to know who Babu Chiri Sherpa was. He wasn't just an experienced climber, he was a legend. A living icon of the Nepali mountains. A man who had climbed Everest 10 times. 10 times. Most people can't make it even once. Every ascent is risk, cold, thin air, and a body that refuses to work at 8,000 meters. And he kept doing it again and again, as if he were walking to the next village. And that's not all. He held 2 world records, and both of them were absolutely unbelievable. The first, he spent 21 hours on the summit of Everest, without oxygen. Think about that. Up where every minute can be your last, where temperatures drop to 40 below, where your brain starts shutting down from lack of air. He stayed almost an entire day, slept on the roof of the world, alone, in a tiny tent. The second record, the fastest ascent of Everest. 16 hours and 56 minutes from base camp to the summit. What takes other climbers 3 to 5 days, he covered in a single push. No stops, no overnight camps. Just kept moving upward as if he were climbing a staircase. In the Khumbu region, the Sherpa homeland at the foot of Everest, every child knows his name. For Nepal, he is a national hero. He's spoken of alongside Tenzing Norgay, the Sherpa who first reached the summit with Hillary back in 1953. Professional mountaineers, people who train for years just to attempt one ascent, call him astonishing. That word comes up again and again in interviews, in expedition reports, in memoirs. Astonishing Babu, the man stronger than the mountain. And this very man, a record breaker, a symbol of endurance, someone who knew Everest better than his own home, simply vanishes during a routine walk. But where does someone like this come from? Babu Chiri was born in the mid-60s in the village of Taksindu, a tiny settlement high in the Nepali mountains where there was nothing at all, no schools, no roads, no electricity. Light came from candles and a cooking fire. Water came from a stream. The nearest town was several days away on narrow mountain trails. His childhood was spent on a farm. He herded yaks, carried firewood, helped his parents. Every day looked the same. Up before sunrise, work until dark. No books, no teachers. There was simply no one in the village who could teach a child to read. But Babu didn't want to stay illiterate. He started teaching himself. He found old newspapers someone had brought from a distant town. He studied labels on packaging. He traced letters in the dirt with a stick, over and over, until the shapes finally turned into words. Imagine that. A boy in a forgotten mountain village teaching himself to read from scraps and trash. And he formed a dream, a simple one, but huge, to build a school in Taksindu. So other children wouldn't have to follow his path. So they could have what he never did. But for now, it was only a dream. Reality was the mountains, enormous, white, endless. They surrounded the village on all sides. Babu looked at them every day, and he understood. That's where his future was. Not the farm, not the yaks, the mountains. If you want to escape this place, go where everyone else is afraid to go. Go upward. At 13, Babu went into the mountains for the first time, not as a tourist, as a porter, a load carrier. He helped the older Sherpas haul supplies for climbing teams. The work was simple and brutal. Throw 30 kilos onto your back and start climbing. The trails were narrow, steep, and the air thin. Grown men moved slowly, stopping often to catch their breath. And this kid, he ran. He passed everyone. He climbed as if he were walking across flat ground. The senior Sherpas watched him, stunned. How could a 13-year-old have this kind of endurance? He didn't gasp for air. He didn't complain. He just kept going, with that quiet stubbornness that would later define him. They started teaching him how to place crampons, the metal spikes on your boots that are the only thing keeping you alive on ice. How to listen to the mountain. Yes, listen. Mountains speak. The crack of shifting ice, the rattle of falling rocks, the distant hum of a forming avalanche. You have to hear danger before you see it. Babu absorbed everything. He learned to read snow, to tell a safe line from a death trap, to sense the weather by the wind alone. These weren't just skills, they were a language the mountains use with those willing to listen. And even then, it was obvious. The boy had a natural gift for altitude. His lungs worked differently. His blood took up oxygen faster. The genetics of Sherpas are their own story. Thousands of years at high elevation shaped their bodies to thrive up there. But even among Sherpas, Babu was an exception. Everest was still far away. But it was already part of his life. Every day, every trail. And Babu knew that sooner or later, he would climb it. By 16, Babu landed his first real job, a trekking porter, not just helping older Sherpas. A proper contract, real pay, real responsibility. He joined an expedition heading over one of the toughest passes in the region, Amphu Labtsa. Amphu Labtsa is no casual hike. It rises well above 5,000 meters, with steep slopes and long stretches of ice. Seasoned climbers approach it with caution. And here was a teenager seeing it for the first time. And what does he do? Moves as if he were born on those rocks. His pace matched that of veteran Sherpas with 20 years of experience. His technique was clean, efficient, without wasted motion. No rush, no fear, no hesitation. Just placing one foot after the other, breathing steadily, eyes fixed forward. The expedition leaders exchanged looks. Who is this kid? Where did he come from? After that climb, his name started spreading. Sherpa communities are tight-knit. Everyone knows everyone. And if someone shows something extraordinary, word travels fast. Babu was invited to join more serious teams, not as a helper, as a full member. And this is where something shifted. The mountains stopped being just a job, no longer just a way to earn money or escape poverty. They became a calling, the thing he was willing to wake up for at 4 a.m, to climb frozen walls, to risk his life again and again. He felt it in every cell of his body. This is it. This is why I'm here. Not the farm, not the village, the mountains. This is mine. And then comes the moment that turns Babu into a legend among his own people, the mid-80s. Babu Chiri is only 20 years old. Mera Peak, a little over 21,000 feet. Not an 8,000er, but still a serious mountain. The standard route takes 2 full days. Climbers go up slowly, with an overnight stop in a high camp for acclimatization. That's normal. That's the right way. That's how everyone does it. In total, it's 10 to 12 hours of actual climbing, spread over 2 days. Babu does it in 4 hours. 4 hours. No stops, no overnight camp. One continuous push from base to summit. People who witness it can't believe their eyes. It shouldn't be possible. Human bodies aren't supposed to function like that. Above 6,000 meters, the air holds half as much oxygen as at sea level. Every step is a struggle. Your lungs burn. Your heart pounds like crazy. And he just walks, steady, fast, as if he were climbing a regular staircase. Part of it is physiology. Sherpa bodies are adapted to altitude on a genetic level. Their lungs work more efficiently. Their blood carries oxygen better. His body was a machine shaped by nature, specifically for the mountains. After that ascent, everything changes. No one sees him as just a strong porter or a promising young Sherpa anymore. He's something else, a phenomenon. A man whose abilities sit outside the normal range. And this is only the beginning. In the late 80s, Babu was 24, and he received an offer that changed everything. A Russian expedition was heading to Kanchenjunga, the 3rd highest mountain on Earth, more than 28,000 feet tall, one of the most dangerous peaks on the planet. Climbers call it the 5 treasures of snow because of its 5 summits. But those treasures come at a price. Roughly 1 out of every 4 people who try to climb Kanchenjunga never comes back. Babu wasn't invited to carry loads. They brought him in as a guide. A full member of the team, someone who makes decisions, chooses routes, and takes responsibility for safety. It was a test, a real one. Russian climbers are tough. experienced, disciplined, with their own way of reading the mountains. They looked at the young Sherpa with skepticism. "All right, kid, show us what you've got." And he did. On Kanchenjunga, the weather shifts every hour. Winds strong enough to knock you off your feet. Temperatures so low that metal freezes to bare skin. Avalanche zones, ice walls, hidden crevasses. Every decision is a matter of life and death. Babu stayed calm, completely steady. He read the mountain like an open book. He sensed danger where others saw a safe line. He felt weather changes an hour before they arrived. His choices were quick, precise, and never hesitant. The team noticed. In their reports, they wrote, "A rare calm, absolute confidence. We trusted him more than our own eyes." And somewhere on those slopes, Babu realized something important. He understood his limits, and he understood that those limits were far wider than those of almost anyone else alive. He could do more. He could do things others called impossible. All that was left was to prove it to the world. In the early 1990s, Babu Chiri reached the summit of Everest for the first time. He was 25, right in the prime of his strength. 8,848 meters, the roof of the world, the place where the air ends and space begins. The death zone, that's what climbers call everything above 8,000. Up there, the human body doesn't recover. It only breaks down. Every minute counts. Babu climbed with perfect control. No panic, no rush. The ideal pace, not too fast to burn out, not too slow to freeze. Every movement was deliberate. He knew exactly when to breathe, when to pause for a second, when to push on. The summit, his first time. A moment most climbers remember for the rest of their lives. Tears, shouts, hugs. But for Babu, this was only the beginning, because he would come back, again and again and again. Within 5 years, he pulled off something that sounds insane. 2 ascents of Everest within 14 days. Think about that. Climb to the top of the world, descend, catch your breath, and 2 weeks later, go back up. The body hasn't recovered, the lungs still remember the lack of air, the muscles still ache, and he goes anyway. Officially, no one had ever recorded 2 Everest summits in a single season before Babu. This was the late 20th century. Climbing wasn't as popular as it is today, and records were kept far less carefully. Many Sherpas climbed without detailed logs, reports were lost, statistics were incomplete. But on paper, Babu was the first whose double summit in one season was fully confirmed. By the mid-90s, Babu had become one of the most reliable high-altitude Sherpas in the world. His name on an expedition list was a guarantee. If he was with you, you were coming back alive. Wealthy, experienced climbers specifically requested him. They paid extra just to have him on the team. At some point, Babu started earning serious money by Nepali standards. A single climbing season brought home several $1,000s, and over a few years, tens of thousands. In his village, that was unthinkable. For his family, it was real wealth. Babu was glad he could support them, but he himself cared less and less about the money. He spent almost nothing on himself. Everything went to his family. And slowly, something inside him shifted. There was one thing he could no longer tolerate. Western climbers came to Nepal. They hired Sherpas. Sherpas carried their gear, cooked their meals, built their camps, fixed their routes, set their ropes. Sherpas risked their lives so the clients could reach the summit. And then the clients went home, gave interviews, wrote books, collected awards. And in those books, the Sherpas are just background, a faceless crowd. Local porters, our helpers. Sometimes their names aren't even mentioned. Babu saw it again and again, and it infuriated him. He understood it wasn't malice. It was the system. The world was used to seeing Sherpas as support staff, not as equals, not as athletes, not as heroes. And he decided it was time to change that. A Sherpa didn't have to be just a porter. A Sherpa could be a trailblazer, a record holder, someone newspapers write about, someone documentaries are made about. You just had to prove it in a way the world couldn't ignore. And Babu did exactly that. If you're watching this video, it means he succeeded. The name of a Sherpa became bigger than the stereotype of a porter in the shadows. For Babu, records weren't about ego. They were a tool, a way to shift perception. If you do what no one else has done, the world has no choice but to notice, no choice but to acknowledge you. That became his mission, his inner engine. Every climb stopped being just a climb. It became a statement, I'm not here to carry your packs. I'm here to show you we're not weaker than you. We're stronger. And he began preparing for something that would change everything. In early May of 1999, Babu Chiri headed for the summit of Everest once again. But this time, he wasn't climbing as a Sherpa or as part of someone else's team. He had a goal no one had ever attempted. He reached the top, 8,848 meters, the absolute limit of human survival. And instead of heading down like everyone else, he pulled a tiny custom tent from his pack, light, compact, barely the size of a sleeping bag, and he pitched it right on the summit of the world. Down in the camps, people stared through binoculars in disbelief. No one had ever done this. No one had even considered it. Because the summit is a place for minutes, not hours. Up there, the body falls apart. Brain cells die, lungs shut down, your temperature drops like a stone. But Babu stayed. His goal was to spend 21 hours on the summit, without oxygen. It sounded impossible, like a suicide mission. But he began the night. Temperatures plunged to brutal levels. The wind tore at the thin fabric of the tent. He sat upright, controlling his breathing, fighting to stay conscious. He refused to lie down. At that altitude, falling asleep can mean your breathing simply stops. And the most incredible part? He didn't vanish into radio silence. He kept checking in, talking over the radio, cracking jokes. At one point, he even sang the Nepali national anthem to keep himself awake. Down in base camp, people listened in total shock. No one had ever heard a live broadcast from the roof of the world like this. Hours passed, 6 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours, and he was still there, alone on the top of the planet, inside a tent barely larger than his own body, in temperatures that kill faster than any storm. And finally, 21 hours after he arrived, a calm voice comes over the radio. Starting my descent. He comes back alive. Completely exhausted, but alive. The record is official. It has stood for more than 20 years, and no one, not a Sherpa, not a Western climber, not a member of a guided expedition, has ever attempted to repeat an overnight stay on the summit of Everest without oxygen. To understand what that means, most climbers spend 5 to 15 minutes on the top of Everest, enough to take a photo, look around, and immediately head down. Staying longer is dangerous. There is almost no oxygen, and the body is literally dying. For many people, even an hour on the summit could be the point of no return. And Babu Chiri spent 21 hours up there, alone, without oxygen, in a place where a human being simply isn't meant to live. But Babu didn't stop there. On a May morning in the year 2000, he stood in Everest Base Camp, 17,600 feet above sea level. From there to the summit, more than 3.5 vertical kilometers. Normally, it takes 3 to 5 days. Climbers move in stages, sleeping in high camps to let their bodies adapt. Babu checked his watch, and he started walking. No stops, no nights in camp. One continuous push from base camp to the summit. The first section was the Khumbu Icefall, one of the most dangerous parts of the entire route. Giant blocks of ice the size of houses, crevasses hundreds of meters deep, aluminum ladders stretched over bottomless voids. The ice moves constantly, cracks, collapses. Climbers normally pick their way through slowly, cautiously, with their hearts in their throats. Babu moved through it as if it were a trail near his home village, fast, confident, never looking down. Then came the steep slopes, the ice walls, the death zone. He didn't slow down. His breathing stayed steady. His legs worked like pistons. His body was a perfect machine. 16 hours and 56 minutes, from base camp to the summit. The previous record was 20 hours and 24 minutes. Babu beat it by more than 3 hours. 3 hours. That's not just an improvement. That's rewriting the rules. The climbing world was stunned. Physiologists couldn't explain it. Journalists wrote, "This is beyond human capability." Veteran mountaineers shook their heads. "We've seen the numbers, but we still don't believe a person can do that." And Babu just shrugged. For him, it wasn't a miracle. It was work. It was what he was born to do. He proved exactly what he set out to prove. A Sherpa is not a servant. A Sherpa is strength. A Sherpa is a record that the best climbers on Earth cannot break. The world finally saw him. And through him, it saw all of them. But there was something more important than any record. Babu had a family. a wife, and 6 daughters. 6 girls who looked at their father like he was a hero, and he knew that if nothing changed, they would face the same life he once had. A farm, illiteracy, poverty, a closed circle with no way out. He wanted to give them what he never had: education. Real, full education. A chance to choose their own path. A life not tied to the mountains or to luck. And then he remembered his childhood dream. A school in Taksindu. The village where he was born still had no school. Children there were growing up the same way he did, unable to read, with no opportunities. Babu created a foundation. He began raising money for construction. It wasn't easy. Sherpas didn't have large amounts of money, but he had something no one else had: fame. He used every record, every interview, every appearance in the media to talk about the school. He told journalists, "I have climbed Everest 10 times, but the real summit is giving children a future." Money began to come in, small donations from climbers who admired him, contributions from organizations, grants. Construction began. His dream was simple but huge: to change life in the region, not for himself, for those who would come after, so that children in mountain villages could study, so they could have a choice. His records made him famous, but the school, that was what would make him truly great. He understood that, and he worked on it every single day. He had a new plan, a crazy one, ambitious, something no one had ever attempted: a double traverse of Everest, climb from the northern side, from Tibet, cross the summit, descend into Nepal on the southern side, then turn around immediately, climb back to the summit, and descend again into Tibet. 2 Everest ascents in a row. No return to base camp. No real rest. One continuous expedition across the roof of the world and back. It would have been a new level of high-altitude climbing. No one had even tried anything like it, because it sounded like fiction. A human body isn't built for that kind of punishment. The death zone has that name for a reason. You're not supposed to stay there long, let alone stay active. And he planned to spend days there, not lying in a tent, but moving. But Babu knew he could do it. 10 successful ascents, 2 world records, a body that functioned at altitude better than anyone else's. If anyone could pull this off, it was him. The 2001 expedition was preparation, route scouting, logistics, acclimatization. He planned to climb, check conditions, descend, and return a few months later for the real attempt. Everything was going to plan: good weather, a strong team, a familiar route, Babu in perfect shape. He was already replaying every step of the traverse in his mind. The 29th of April, 2001. Camp 2 at about 21,000 feet. A calm morning. The wind that blew all night finally dies down. The sun pushes through the clouds. Perfect weather. A rest day. No climbing higher, no summit push. Just acclimatization, letting the body settle. Climbers sit in their tents, drink tea, check their gear. Babu steps outside, tells his teammates, "I'm going to take a look at the route. Want to see the condition of the slope above. I'll be right back." Only a couple 100 meters from camp. Clear visibility, no danger, a simple walk. He moves across the snow, light steps, confident. He has walked this stretch hundreds of times. He knows every rock, every ripple of the glacier. But the night before, fresh snow fell, a thin layer, just a few centimeters. It hides what was visible yesterday. Beneath the snow lies a crevasse, deep, more than 30 meters straight down. It cuts across the route, covered by a delicate snow bridge. Babu takes a step. The snow under his foot collapses, a single instant, and he's gone. He drops so fast he doesn't even have time to shout. He simply disappears, as if the mountain opened up and swallowed him whole. Silence. The indifferent calm of the high peaks. Camp is only a few 100 meters away. No one hears anything. The greatest Sherpa alive, the man who climbed Everest 10 times, who set endurance records that stunned the world, falls into a hidden crevasse on an ordinary walk. 3 seconds. And it's over. His teammates didn't realize Babu was missing until evening. At first, no one worried. He'd said he was going to photograph the route. Maybe he got distracted. Maybe he stopped by another camp to chat. Everyone knew him, and he often paused to talk. An hour passed, then 2. The sun began to drop, the temperature fell. Someone finally asked, "Where's Babu?" Silence. They exchanged looks, stepped out of the tents, scanned the slope. Nothing. They started calling for him, shouting his name. Their voices echoed across the glacier. No answer. Panic grew. They grabbed headlamps and ropes and headed out. They followed the direction he had walked that morning, sweeping their lights across the snow, searching for tracks. And they found them. Clear boot prints in the snow, leading straight away from camp, a clean line, step after step. And then the tracks just ended, simply stopped, as if he had vanished into thin air. They shined their lamps around, untouched snow, no marks, nothing at all, except a strange shadow a little farther ahead, a faint disturbance in the surface. They moved closer, carefully, testing each step with an ice axe, a crevasse, a narrow crack in the ice hidden beneath the fresh snow. The snow bridge had collapsed. Below, darkness. They discovered it around midnight. 2 Sherpas volunteered to go down. They tied knots, clipped into anchors, and descended into the frozen throat of the mountain. Their headlamps cut through the blackness. The crevasse was tight, less than a meter wide. They squeezed sideways, shoulders scraping ice walls. 80 centimeters of space, just enough to force themselves through. 30 meters down. And there, Babu. He lay still, frozen in the exact position in which he had fallen. No signs of struggle, no attempt to claw at the walls. He hadn't even had time to raise his hands. Death had been instantaneous. The man who spent 21 hours on the summit of the world died in 3 seconds of falling. News spread across the radio channels instantly. Babu Chiri was gone. Sherpas from every expedition began heading toward base camp, from nearby camps, from other routes. They dropped everything and came, because this wasn't just a fallen climber, this was Babu, their hero, their legend. Around 60 people gathered to bring him home. The first task was to lift his body out of the crevasse, 30 meters straight up through a narrow ice shaft. They worked for hours, ropes, pulleys, coordination. Every centimeter fought for. When they finally brought the body to the surface, the hardest part began, getting him through the Khumbu icefall. Once again, the icefall is a nightmare. Shifting ice, deep crevasses, hanging seracs, ladders stretched over empty air. Even unburdened, people cross it with their lives on the line. And now they had to carry a body. Over ice, over ladders, through collapsing terrain. 60 Sherpas moved like a single organism. They rotated every few hundred meters, carrying him on their shoulders, on stretchers, passing him from hand to hand, slowly, carefully, with absolute respect. It became one of the most difficult body recoveries in Everest's history. Most climbers who die up there remain on the mountain. The danger is too great. But not Babu. He was going home, no matter the cost. It was an unofficial funeral, the mountain's farewell to a legend. Every Sherpa carrying him understood they weren't carrying just a body. They were carrying a symbol, proof that Sherpas are not a faceless workforce. They remember their heroes. When the procession reached base camp, hundreds of people gathered, climbers, guides, porters, standing silent, some crying. The news reached Kathmandu, the village of Taksindu, his family, all of Nepal, the entire country mourned. Radio stations cut their broadcasts. Newspapers printed black front pages. In the Khumbu region, people walked into the streets. They cried openly, without shame. Babu Chiri had come home, but not the way he intended. But death doesn't erase memory. It sets it in stone. In the year 2005, the Babu Chiri Sherpa Museum opened in Kathmandu. The ceremony was led by the Crown Prince of Nepal, a prince. A member of the royal family came to honor a Sherpa from a forgotten mountain village. Inside were his belongings, his summit photos, the radio that stayed silent that night on Everest, his ice axe, his crampons, his personal gear. Every item was a story, every display a tribute. Nepal issued a postage stamp with his face on it, an official national stamp. His portrait began traveling around the world on envelopes. The boy who learned to read from scraps of packaging had become a symbol carried across continents. He was placed alongside Tenzing Norgay, the legendary Sherpa who first climbed Everest with Edmund Hillary in 1953. 2 names, 2 national heroes, 2 men who changed how the world sees Nepal. On Everest itself, near Camp 2, at the place where he died, climbers built a memorial, small, simple, a stone cairn with a plaque. But it became one of the most visited spots on the entire route. Every expedition passing by stops there. Some leave flowers, some a stone, some just stand in silence for a minute. Sherpas pray. Western climbers remove their hats. The place is a reminder, even the best of the best are never safe. Even the man who knew Everest like his own home can be gone in a single moment. But it also says something else. True greatness isn't measured only by records. It's measured by how people remember you after you're gone. And Babu Chiri is remembered. What remains after a person is gone? Babu Chiri changed world mountaineering. Not with new techniques or new routes. He changed how the world sees Sherpas. Before him, Sherpas were background figures, anonymous helpers standing in the shadow of Western heroes. After him, that became impossible to ignore. A Sherpa could be a record holder, a pioneer, someone capable of doing what Western climbers once believed was their exclusive domain. He proved it not with words, but with numbers. 21 hours on the summit, untouched to this day. 16 hours and 56 minutes to climb from base camp to the top, still unbeaten. More than 20 years have passed. Gear has gotten lighter, training more sophisticated, forecasts more accurate. But Babu's records stand, like monuments, like proof of what a human body can do when it's shaped by the mountains. Babu Chiri became a symbol, not just of strength and endurance, but of the courage to dream, of humility and success, of a deeper kind of greatness, one measured not by fame, but by what you leave behind. Western climbers now know the names of the Sherpas they climb with. Journalists write about them. Filmmakers tell their stories, not out of charity, out of respect. And much of that is because of one man, a boy born in a village with no school, a boy who taught himself to read, a boy who wanted to show the world, we are not weaker than you. He proved it, forever. And there's something piercing about the way he died. Not in the death zone, not on the summit, where every breath is a fight, not in a storm or an avalanche or a blind push for the top. He died near camp, a few hundred meters away, on an ordinary walk, in clear, calm weather. A man who climbed Everest 10 times, who spent a night on the summit, who set speed records, who knew these mountains better than anyone, lost his life to a single misstep in the safest place on the route. It's a harsh lesson. The mountains don't forgive routine. They don't forgive the thought, I've been here 100 times, nothing will happen. They don't forgive that one moment when you ease up and think you're in control. Babu wasn't reckless, but he was human, and humans get tired of staying alert. 300 meters from the tent, a familiar path. Good weather, just one photo, one step, one hidden crevasse. 3 seconds. Even the best make simple mistakes. Even the greatest are still human, not superheroes, not immortal. And you know what? That makes his story even more human, even more real. He didn't die chasing something impossible. He died doing something completely ordinary. And that is more frightening than any dramatic ending, because it reminds you, in the mountains, danger is everywhere, always, even when you don't see it. Everest doesn't choose. It doesn't spare its heroes. It doesn't make exceptions for legends. The mountain takes what it wants, and it takes even those who seem stronger than it. There is another part of the story, his family. Babu left behind a wife and 6 daughters. In any Nepali village, that would have meant poverty and a closed loop all over again. No provider, education too expensive, life collapsing back into struggle. But the royal family stepped in. Nepali sources say the daughters were promised free education at one of the prestigious schools attended by the children of the elite and relatives of the monarchy. The man who once said, "I never saw the door of a school," made it possible for his own children to walk through the door, opened for them by the highest people in the country. His own school in Taksindu also became real. Depending on the source, the building was almost finished during his lifetime or completed right after the tragedy. But the important thing is that the school exists, in a village that once didn't have a single book, in the place Babu left behind, so he could one day give his people what he himself never had. But his legacy wasn't only education. Babu was a key figure in the Everest Summiteers Association. He served as vice president of the organization that took on the task of cleaning the upper sections of Everest, the areas most expeditions never reach. For them, it was a matter of principle. If Sherpas spent years guiding clients up the mountain, they should also protect it. This was no longer the role of invisible porters. It was the stance of people who saw Everest as their land and took responsibility for it. There's one more striking detail. Official obituaries in Nepal called Babu a national hero, but one line mattered more than all the praise. His father had been a porter in the legendary 1953 British expedition, the one where Hillary and Tenzing first reached the summit. The connection is almost symbolic. The father carried someone else's load toward that first ascent. And half a century later, the sun set records on the same mountain that captured the attention of the entire world. If you think Babu's death was a rare accident, a tragic twist of fate, then it's worth remembering another story, a completely different one, and at the same time, exactly the same. The story of a man who tried to defeat Everest in a place where defeat is guaranteed, Maurice Wilson. We have a full video about him on this channel, a man who was the complete opposite of Babu Chiri. Babu was a master of altitude, a phenomenon of biology, a Sherpa legend. Maurice was an ordinary Englishman with no experience, no knowledge, no gear, but with a will strong enough to crack stone. Wilson came to the mountain like a wanderer in the spring of 1934, a man who had already cheated death twice. He survived the First World War as the only man left from his unit, and later overcame an illness considered incurable. He believed he had become something more than a regular person, that he could do what others couldn't, and in that, he was strangely similar to Babu Chiri. The main parallel is simple. Maurice Wilson wanted to climb Everest, but it was 1934. No one had reached the summit yet. Humanity would do it only 20 years later. But the chance to become the first belonged to Wilson. He lived in London, learned to fly, somehow scraped together money, and bought a small aircraft. Flew it himself from England to India, then walked to Everest, and climbed above 7,000 meters in nothing but regular winter clothing. There was virtually no specialized gear back then. Oxygen bottles weren't even part of the conversation. In the end, Maurice Wilson simply froze to death. And there was betrayal in that ending. He had 3 helpers he had paid. They were supposed to wait for him at a camp near 6,000 meters. He planned to descend after his attempt, be met there, helped, warmed, given tea, sheltered by a fire. But when he returned, there was no one. The camp was empty, and he no longer had the strength to survive. The link between Babu and Maurice runs through their deaths as well. They are alike in the way their endings feel senseless, almost independent of their own actions. And that, Disher, is the most brutal truth of the mountains. They take lives, and they will keep taking them. It doesn't matter whether you're a legend or a beginner, prepared or clueless. Everest gives no discounts to anyone. Today, more than 400 people lie on its slopes. That's only the official count. The real number is higher. Some bodies are hidden in the Khumbu icefall, others swallowed by snow and crevasses. Others vanish the same way Babu vanished. Among them are many well-known names: Francis Arsentiev, Hannelore Schmatz, David Sharp, Lincoln Hall, the man known as Green Boots, and many more. Their stories are on this channel, each one a reminder of what a single attempt to touch the sky can cost. If these stories speak to you, subscribe, leave a like, and tell us in the comments who you want to hear about next.